Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, that's everything for me from housekeeping. So I'm now going to hand over to Maurice Lynch from Northern Powergrid.
Afternoon, folks. I hope you're all well. And firstly, thank you so much for attending our spring webinar. And again, the whole focus of this webinar is to just brief you on all things for our upcoming competition for spring period. As you know, we're doing 3 tenders a year. This is the first of 2024. I'm very, very excited. I hope you are as well. We're going out for a number of sites, folks. So please, if you have any questions or queries or anything we can do to make your life better, please ask, because we're here to do that. We're here to support you. The two big asks from myself as well is that if you're an FSP and you've not registered your assets onto Piclo, please do, because you're going to be missing out. There is lots of opportunity going forward within 2024 in terms of different use cases where you're looking to use Flex for. And also, if you're not registered for our monthly newsletter, please do as well, because that is full of bits of useful information in terms of what the Flex team and MPG are up to, and as also the wider DSO team. Look, thanks again for your attendance. I'm going to leave it there, and I think I'm passing over to Jeremy, who's going to take you through today's presentation, and look forward to taking questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Maurice. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeremy Meara. I'm the Operational Data and Systems Manager working within the Systems Flexibility team at Northern Powergrid, along with Maurice. Just the next slide. Thank you very much indeed. So the objectives to this webinar, just to kind of reminder about who's on the team on the Northern Powergrid side of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the tender timeline for the spring tender, discuss the sites that we have where we've got flexibility services opportunities, go through a little bit of other information in regards to the platforms that we operate, how to use them, the products, case studies and aggregators. And then we will finish off rather, in terms of talking about some upcoming stakeholder events that you may hopefully be interested in. So if you could move on, please. Thank you. This is the team. The team has grown somewhat since we last held one of these webinars. We've now got the Maurice, Nicole, Liz, Laura and myself, but we've also added Chris. Chris is not quite yet with us, but he's going to be joining us as an operations manager in the very near future. And then we will be expanding the team yet further in April, and we will kind of announce the details of those individuals in due course. So that's the team. So please reach out to us whenever you need to. So the purpose of this session really is just to outline the flexibility services procurement process for spring 2024, give you details of the sites, give you details of the utilisation prices that we're looking at, and explain how you can get involved and provide hopefully other useful information that will inform you as we kind of move on our flexibility journey. Thank you. Thanks. Just by way of a reminder, in the event that you're kind of new to a Northern Powergrid flexibility webinar, we are the distribution network operator that services the North East and North Yorkshire, South Yorkshire and also Northern Lincolnshire. You can see on the map there the territory that we cover. We've got 3.9 million homes and businesses and about 8 million customers in our patch. We are a mixture of kind of urban, semi-urban and rural kind of areas. We've got some significant conurbations in our patch. So we've got Leeds, Sheffield, Bradford, Newcastle. So we have quite a range of territory. We are committed to flexibility first, which effectively means that we will prioritise the adoption of a flexibility service wherever possible, provided that it's economically cost effective and technically viable. So flexibility first is our stock in trade from this point on, and projected net benefits up to £156 million by avoiding conventional reinforcement costs. That's over the course of the current regulatory period. So if you move on, please. Thank you. Rebecca, I think this is for you now.
It is, thank you. So just to get us started, we're going to launch our first poll. So Emma, if you wouldn't mind launching that poll now. And this is just to give us a good idea of who we've got in the room. So if you wouldn't mind answering this poll, which is how would you describe your organization's role in flexibility services? You can take as many options as you like. And if you don't fit into any of these categories, there is an other option. And then you please do type in the chat what you would describe your organization's role in flexibility services as. Fantastic. I can see lots of votes flying in there. Please do keep them coming. I'll just give it one more second and then I will hand back to Jeremy. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in that. I'm going to end the poll there. I'll just briefly share the results, and it does look like we've got quite a range of stakeholders in the room, which is fantastic, fantastic to see there. Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Jeremy, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So this spring 2024 tender, we're looking for flexibility for winter 2024-25 and 25-26, and we're looking to defer demand, i.e. defer reinforcement at primary and distribution substations. Our plan is to run 3 tenders this year. So what you can see in that kind of table there are the milestones for the first of those tenders, which is the spring tender. We will have a summer tender and an autumn tender. Running 3 tenders means that the tenders will be quite close together. So just to kind of give you a kind of a feel for the sort of the timing, that sort of pattern, if you like, between this tender and the spring and the summer tender, the DPS for the summer tender closes on the 20th of May, so you can see not that far behind the one that we're looking at now, and then the bidding opens on the 26th of June. So the spring and the summer tenders kind of run pretty closely, kind of be adjacent to each other. So if you miss out on the spring tender, don't worry, you can always kind of go and participate in the summer tender. So as ever, we're looking for both demand turn up and demand turn down rather, and generation turn up. In addition, to the sort of demand deferral, we're also looking for expressions of interest at a further 5 locations for 25, 26, 27, 28, but also 31, 32. So we're extremely interested in anybody who perhaps will be able to help us with those kind of areas as well. They're areas where we don't expect that we've got a particular kind of requirement at this particular point in time, but we can forecast that we are going to get a requirement in the not too distant future. So those sort of dates, just to kind of run through them quickly. The company registration that closes on in well, early April, I guess. Asset registration closes at the beginning of May. Then you've got a time to confirm your actually asset entry into the competitions. That's middle of May, and then the bidding window opens the day after, with the competition bidding window finally closing on the 3rd of June. So we've got a little bit of time to play with, but those kind of dates are going to come thick and fast. So if you are thinking of bidding and getting involved, please be cognizant of those dates. They will hit us very quickly. Right, next slide, please. Thank you. This is just kind of to give a little more kind of detail in terms of the actual nuts and bolts of the competitions that we're running and the sites that we're interested in. I think when we did the autumn tender, the autumn webinar rather, last year, we didn't necessarily have this information in the tender, so we thought that this would be a useful addition. So these are the HV sites. You can see that we've got 2 HV sites. One is Southgate, that's the substation name, and the conurbation is Market Wheaton. And similarly, we've got Crowell, which is Scunthorpe. You can see that they're for 24, 25 and 25, 26. You can see that we've got some utilisation ceiling prices that we're quoting that we could pay up to. We've got some the months of interest, the capacity of interest, the days of interest, and the times. You will note that there's that the price differences are quite significant between Southgate and Crowell. That's simply because of the cost of the reinforcement work or it's reflective of the cost of the reinforcement work that we're deferring. The other thing that you'll kind of see is that on the Crowell competition, that the utilisation ceiling prices are slightly different for 24, 25 and 25, 26. That's because we are interested in a narrower flexibility window in 25, 26. So the amount of money that we have available to fund the flexibility is compressed into a shorter window. So those are the two HV tenders, and we've got 5 expressions of interest for primary substations as well. All of those sites are on the Piccolo Flex website, and the Piccolo Flex website and its kind of sister website, the sort of the general Piccolo website, you can download postcode information and also geo-package files, so you can identify exactly what those kind of sites are in the specific locations. So you may find that useful. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. And then these are just the LV sites. I think we've just pulled out an example there. I think that's Chester Street, but there are 17 LV sites. You can see, obviously, they reference the location in terms of the town that they serviced by those sites, and then subsequent to that, there's a substation name. So they're the LV sites, 17 of those. They are all the same kind of period of time, the same capacity requirement, same days of the week, and the same time window. So if we could move on from that one, please.
Thank you, Jeremy. I think we were just going to pause there for any clarification, specifically on timings and locations. So there is still a lot more information to come on the procurement process itself, but if there's any clarifications on what is being presented so far. So there are a couple of things in the chat that I'll just briefly pick up on, Jeremy. So Lena asks, I saw that you have postcodes for LV, but not for HV. Can you share HV postcodes? Is that possible?
I think it's possible. Yes, it's not something that I have at my fingertips, but I think it's something that I can develop, and we can certainly share those. So yes, that can be done.
Fantastic. There is another query on postcodes for Tony as well, so that will be something that we can follow up with after the session. Clarifications on postcodes for all of the different locations where possible. There's no other questions in the chat. Does anyone have any other clarifications on anything that's presented so far, specifically if we can keep it to locations and timings? No? Okay, I'll hand back to you then, Jeremy, to keep going.
Thank you. This is just a kind of a refresher for people who are familiar with Piccolo, and it's a kind of a quick kind of teaching for those who aren't, just in terms of the procurement process. I mean, first and foremost, Piccolo is a market visibility platform. So we initiate the competition, we advertise the need, we advertise the location. The flexibility service providers hopefully register their assets on Piccolo, and then we kind of go through a kind of a journey through qualification and on to bidding. So that's the key. I think that's just the key thing to kind of note from Piccolo. It's a shop window for us to advertise our requirements, and then we kind of progress through qualification, etc., into bidding, and then dispatch and settlement is undertaken in a different platform, but we'll kind of touch upon that later. So if we could just bob along, thank you. So effectively, what we have is we've got kind of pre-competition activities, we've got kind of bidding/competition activities, and then we've got post-bidding activities. So we'll just cover them in a little detail. So the first thing that an FSP needs to do if it's interested in participating is it needs to complete a company registration, what Piccolo refers to as a DPS. And I think it's a pretty straightforward process. There are various kind of questions that a company needs to respond to, some bits of documentation that need to be supplied. We review those, all being well, they're satisfactory, and then we say, right, great, we're a company that you are a company that we would like to do business with. Let's kind of move forward. In parallel, however, and that's kind of an important point to note, is that this isn't all kind of a sequential activity. In parallel, you can be registering your assets on the Piccolo website. that then allows us to see whether any of the assets are actually in the areas of interest that we're seeking to obtain flexibility for. So that's their kind of pre-competition activities, and obviously we advertise our network needs. That's the whole kind of raison d'etre of the Piccolo site, really. So that's pre-competition activities, company registration, asset registration, and then we're good to go. So if we could move to the next one, please. Thank you. So once the competition, we're into the competition phase of activity. Obviously, an FSP will have satisfied the company qualification requirements. They'll have put the assets onto the website. The company's, an FSP's assets are automatically qualified for a competition if they are within the boundary of the competition. The FSP is then notified that the assets are in those kind of boundaries. They're invited to bid. If they would like to bid, they bid. They can kind of submit kind of pricing information. They provide us the windows of kind of that they can provide flexibility for. Now, I think a kind of a really important point that I kind of like to tease out here is, whilst we say, for example, oh, we've got a 4-hour or maybe a 5-hour window where we're interested in obtaining flexibility, by no means do we require or expect or demand an FSP has to kind of deliver for the whole of that window. That simply isn't how it works. So if an FSP in a window of 4 hours or 5 hours could deliver an hour's worth of support, we would absolutely welcome that with open arms. So it's not a case of you have to be able to support the whole window. We'd be delighted if you could support, a portion of the window, and we would encourage you to bid if that's the case. So you bid, then we've got contract award. Now that happens that kind of takes place according to the normal kind of legal manner in which these things kind of are conducted, and then there's obviously we get to the point where the flexibility is required, and then it's provided, and that's kind of how it works. So that's competition activities. If we just move on to the next slide, please. Post-competition activities. Right. I did make reference to dispatch and settlement is done through a different system to the kind of the market window, the Piccolo activity, etc., etc. We use Flexible Power as our dispatch and settlement system. It's a joint initiative that the industry, the distribution industry, kind of developed. You can see there's a number of companies involved. Basically, the way that this works is that once a contract has been agreed, we set up the details of the assets on the system. We will kind of make declarations of asset availabilities, certainly for the products that we're dealing with in this kind of particular instance. Northern Powergrid deals all that. The flexibility service provider then receives a dispatch signal at the appropriate time, delivers the flexibility. Then it's sort of the flexible service provider will, after the flexibility window has been kind of closed, they will submit meter readings. We will compare the meter readings to what we expected. We will do a kind of a calculation in the background. It automatically generates an invoice that we kind of pay, and it's just settled. So that's kind of how that works. And I know I've kind of cantered through that at speed. We obviously, in the fullness of time, we kind of happily talk people through this and guide them through this. But it's a relatively simple process, and the whole point is that we want to reduce the amount of kind of legwork that the FSPs have to do. So that's why we use this kind of platform. It settles automatically. FSPs simply have to provide us with their meter readings. They can either do that through an API, if they're familiar with that type of technology, or they can do it by simply uploading a CSV file, and then we just take care of the rest. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We're trying to make it as kind of hands-free, as hands-off as possible from an FSP point of view, and iron out any kinks that may exist. So that's that one, please, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Jeremy. I
you.
think we were just going to pause there again for any clarification. So anything around the procurement process, around PIC law, around flexible power. There was one question in the chat specifically about the version of contract that would be used, and that's been answered in the chat. That'll be version 2.1. There is a question that's just popped in from Tony Charlton. So is dispatch and flex power by API, or is manual dispatch allowed?
Manual dispatch is allowed. The product that we use, pardon me, whilst dispatch signals are sent from flexible power automatically, you don't have to use them. I mean, the contract effectively defines when the flexibility kind of service window kind of will open and close, and therefore, you can just diarize that and you can deal with it manually. That's completely fine. So no, there's no kind of requirement for the API to be used for this dispatching, none whatsoever.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Jeremy. Any other clarifications from anyone on what's been presented so far before we move on? No? Okay, great. I am just going to launch a couple more polls.
Sorry, I've got a question. Sorry.
Yes, go for it, Alvin.
I was just typing it in, and I realized
okay.
it's probably best if I just ask the question.
Perfect.
So I was late. I'm sorry about that. I was stuck on another meeting. You may have covered this already, but in terms of the overarching contracts, is that something that you are working towards, or is that something in view for you? Like we know, some of the DSOs have moved away from the fixed term contracts towards overarching contracts, which I think underlying that is an intention to move to more day ahead participation. Is that something that's in view for you, or is it not yet on the radar?
Sorry, Jeremy, I'll let you go.
No, you fire away, Nicole. Fire away.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that it is in as plans, Alvin, to be using the overarching contract. So at this moment in time, we are using version 2.1, but we do plan to use version 3, which we are working on in the Open Networks contract working group at the minute. And when we implement version 3, we will be using that as an overarching framework contract.
Right. Okay. And what is your timeline for that?
So it all depends on when version 3 is ready to be implemented. So we're having conversations in the minute in Open Networks, but we do plan to hopefully use it in the next tender round, which is in summer.
Summer. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks for the question, Alvin. Thanks, Nicole. So we are just going to launch a set of polls. So Emma, if you could launch the second set of polls, please. So this is just to get some insight from you all on how you find the PIC law platform and also the flexible power platform for those who have used it. So the first question, if you can answer on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree. And so the first question is, the PIC law platform is user-friendly and easy to use. And then the same scale again from 1 to 5, the flexible power platform is user-friendly and easy to use. And if anyone does have any specific feedback, would welcome your comments in the chat, please, as well. That would be fantastic. So you can see the votes flying in there. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in the polls. It is really hugely appreciated to get your feedback. Just give it one more moment and then I will hand on. Okay, I will end the poll there. So thank you very much for that, everyone. As I say, if you've got any specific feedback on PIC law or flexible power, please put your comments to explain the scores you just gave in the chat there. Great. Okay, now I'm handing on to Laura Brown, who's going to pick up the presentation.
Thanks, Rebecca. My name is Laura Brown. I'm a commercial manager for flexibility services and system flexibility. And Rebecca will move on the slides, but we're going to quickly chat about the product that we're going to use today. Thanks to Adriana, she's ahead of me with the questions in the chat, but we'll talk about these. From our Spring 2024 tender, we're only going to be using the industry-aligned flexibility products. And this has come out of some requests from FSPs and stakeholders for us to, as an industry, to further align what we're doing and standardise the final parts of flexibility products and how they're defined. And that's to provide more transparency, more clarity, and make sure that that standardisation of approaches embedded across all the Great Britain DNOs and DSOs. So we've done that large piece of work all last year and across all the DNOs, and we've defined the products now by a set of characteristics known as the common product parameters, and these are split into three components: the market structure, the service availability, and the service utilization. Now, for us at the moment, we're only utilising one of those products. The flexibility services we'll be using is scheduled utilisation, and this is for the advanced planning for the management of the forecasted seasonal demand on our network. So anyone who's familiar with our previous product, Sustain, it's very like that. It's just much more tied down with the characteristics of it. So it's an evolution of the Sustain product. If you move on to the next slide, I'll explain a little bit of the common product parameters that are characteristic of this product. So it's a utilization only product. That means that there's no payment for availability. As Jeremy mentioned, we provide lots of heads up of when we actually need this service to be dispatched. Therefore, it's not something that we would just be looking for you to be on reserve for. You'll know well in advance of when we need it. So the market structure elements is we're going to, as I say, pay for utilisation only, and the price will be set at the time of trade. So when you put in your bid. When it comes to the utilisation of the service itself, we'll be paying in units of megawatt hours. We'll be utilising the time periods of the half-hourly settlement, and we were expecting in those half-hourly settlements for it to be continuous in that half hour that you bid for. We don't need a response time in this because you know when the start time is and you know when we would like you to finish. And therefore there's no payment for any response time in this product. The minimum utilisation time is 30 minutes, and if for that we mean we might have a service window need of maybe a couple of hours or maybe the whole day, but the minimum we would ask you to bid for is at least one of those half-hourly time periods. So if you can only turn up for 1/2 hour in that day or in that window, then please bid for that. As long as you can provide a minimum utilisation volume of 10 kilowatts per zone, and the industry is trying to move away from even that small value of 10 kilowatts to take that requirement away altogether. So any sort of flexibility can bid in. But at the moment, we just don't quite have the controls and systems in place across the country to adopt that. So at the moment, we're setting that limit at 10 kilowatts for each zone that you bid into. The utilisation instructions will be sorted out at the trade, and in the future there might be some evolution of whether you can the DNO can say, well, we did contract for 10 kilowatts but we only need 3. We're not at that stage yet, but it might be something that we'll look to in the future. So we're not going to be using those elements at this time. So that's me. Rebecca, you can move on. So this final slide for me is just to explain the sort of timeline of what we're doing. So what we're trying to do with scheduled utilisation is get the contracts in place well in advance of need, so that we can provide the planning levels of confidence for our network. And therefore, we've got we're arranging the bid. We're tendering for the contracts at the moment, and then we'll be looking for, depending on the service window required by which competition you bid for, we'll be looking for provision in the months of November, December, January and February. This winter period and then the following winter period. And it's going to be 2-year contracts that we're looking for, but you can bid for one or both of the winter periods, depending on your availability. And that's me. Thanks very much, Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Laura. So I was just going to pause there for clarifications. Does anyone have any specific questions for Laura on the flexibility products themselves? Feel free to raise your hand if you do. There was nothing that I saw that popped up in the chat during that. Okay, no problem. We do just have another poll to launch now. Emma, if you wouldn't mind launching the polls. So these polls are specifically on the flexibility products. So the first one is on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree. To what extent do you agree with these statements? So the first statement being, I understand how the scheduled utilization flexibility product works in practice. The second one is the standardization approach for distribution flexibility services across all the DNO DSOs is helpful. And then the final question is whether you would benefit from a specific workshop that focuses on the industry aligned flexibility products. So gives a more of a focus and more detail on some of the information that Laura's just gone through there. And I can see the votes flying in, which is fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll just give that one more moment. I'm just going to end the poll there. Thank you very much, everyone, for your votes there. And just to highlight, we have a fair understanding of the products. We've got a strong level of agreement that the standardised approach is helpful, and we've got a strong appetite for a specific workshop that focuses on the industry aligned products. So I'll stop sharing there, and then I'm going to hand straight on to Liz.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Liz Sidebotham, Commercial Manager for Flexibility in the System Flexibility team, working alongside Laura and Nicole, who you've also heard from today, and Maurice, and Nicole, who has helpfully chipped in on contracts as well. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So this slide is about who can provide flexibility services. So because we're looking for flexibility to enable us to defer network reinforcement, we're looking for anybody who could provide demand turn down or generation turn up. So this could be a large electricity demand user, a factory, supermarket, etc. An example there is if you have refrigeration, you could turn down for a period of time. That could be a way of turning your demand down. Electricity generators and storage, which is storage discharge, and also individual homes or small businesses. With the 10 kilowatt minimum capacity requirement that Laura referred to earlier, a large user, generation or storage could provide their flexibility to us and contract with us directly. A smaller business or home would have to provide via an aggregator. So next slide, please. So because a lot of flexibility comes from smaller customers, aggregators are very useful, enabling that flexibility to get to market and to contribute to managing our network. Larger customers can also work through aggregators if they prefer that route. So in the first two tender rounds, we were looking for flexibility to help us manage our HV constraints. In our previous tender round in the autumn 23, we actually, as well as running tenders for the HV network constraints, we also looked at, for the first time, launching tenders for managing the LV constraints, and we tendered quite successfully. We had quite a lot of interest in that. And for example, in Leeds here, in that one city, we had 4 LV areas, distribution substations, where we're looking for flexibility. In this next tender round that's live now, we're looking for flexibility, as been mentioned earlier, at 17 distribution substations. Next slide, please.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Liz. So we're now going into Q&A. So any clarifications in regards to what Liz has just presented, but also broader questions as well. So any questions you have on the topic, please do post them in the chat or raise your hand to ask them on the content that's been discussed today or on flexibility more broadly. So we do have one question for you, Laura, in the chat, please, from Sarah Rigby. And so the question's just jumped off my screen. So give me a second there. Have I understood correctly that scheduled utilisation has utilisation timing requirements specified at the time the contract is placed, for example, at the start of the season?
Yes, that's right, Sarah. If Rebecca can move to the slide, for example, the HV tender, I'll explain what the time requirement is. Sorry to jump through slides.
This one?
Up to Liz's or Nicole's. No, sorry, keep going. Sorry, to the tenders themselves. Sorry, I might have. There's a service window basically that we we identify, which is the time we'd like to start providing the flexibility and the time, or certainly the window that we are requiring flexibility. And then we would ask the FSPs to be available in one of the half-hourly periods or all of the half-hourly periods if they can in that process and in that time window. So that's what that's where we would explain the timings, if that makes sense, Sarah.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Laura. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Sarah's asked us the season as well. So what we specify is the months and the days of the week, and then the times of day. So those 3 pieces of information will map out exactly what we're after.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Laura. I can see you. That's answered your question in the chat. Thanks for confirming that, Sarah. So the next question from Rohit Kumar about the Power Portal. What is the declaration process and what are the APIs about to do? Is that a one for you, Jeremy?
Yeah, it definitely is. The declaration process is essentially a process that takes place in the Flexible Power platform, and it's about essentially preparing the kind of the FSP to be ready to provide flexibility. So it prepares the kind of the flexibility service provider, the Flexible Power platform to be able to issue dispatch messages through the API. In respect of this particular product that we're using, scheduled utilization, because as Laura said, the kind of the windows are all kind of agreed in advance. The kind of the use of the API kind of dispatch messages are a kind of a moot point. They're not kind of really necessary because all the kind of the windows that the FSP provides flexibility for is all spelled out in the contract. So the sort of the declaration and the issue of sort of the dispatch messages through API is kind of more pertinent to the kind of the shorter term products. So it's not really that relevant in terms of scheduled utilization, if that's okay.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. Hopefully that answers your question, Rohit, but do shout up if you do have any follow-on points or queries. Yes, you've acknowledged that does answer the question. Thank you for that. So we've got another question from Adriano in the chat, and it says, from a slide deck presented a couple of weeks ago, it said, in quotes, customers on Intelligent Octopus and other Octopus EV towers in the Northern Powergrid service area will now automatically take part in demand flexibility and grid balancing schemes for the region. And so the question is, does this mean that customers with Octopus towers in the Northern Powergrid area cannot be part of a contract for the long-term tender?
Hi, yes, sir. I'm happy to pick this one up. So thank you for
Nicole.
your question. Yeah, so the quote that you're just referring to, that's just referring to a case study. So Octopus are one of us providers in one of us flex zones. So that's just showing the example that in that specific zone, Octopus have got customers to sign up and provide flexibility in that region. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks for that, Nicole. So that doesn't prohibit customers being part of a contract for the long-term for the tenders we're talking about now?
That's correct.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you for that. So I have got any other questions in the chat just now, but please, if you do have another question, do put it in there. Would anyone like to raise their hand or come off mute to ask any questions that they have? So we've got another question in the chat from Nick. So we've got, is it possible to touch on future expected volumes out beyond 2026, such as if these are in the HV or LV areas and the estimated increases in requirements? Is that something you're able to comment on, Liz?
Yeah, so we're tendering now for this coming winter and the one after. We've also got what's called an expression of interest or visibility only competition. So there are 5 HV zones where we're looking for people to register their interest in providing flexibility services. And that is, I think, 26, 27, 28, now to 2030, 31, 32 on one of those. Yes, I hope that's useful.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Liz. There is just a follow-up question from Lena, which I think is in regards to Adriano's question, but I think we did clarify that customers that are on Octopus tariffs can still be part of a contract for the long-term tender. I think that was what Nicole just confirmed just then. Great, thank you, Lena. Any other questions? Anyone want to come off mute and ask a question?
Hello.
Hello there, go for it.
Hi, Vanya from Octopus. Just following on from that Octopus question, I just wanted to understand the kind of plans that Northern Powergrid have in the case when two maybe aggregators of flexibility have like provided the same MPAN and intend to use that for the flexibility services. What kind of processes are in place to distinguish who should actually be using that MPAN for flex, essentially?
Thank you for that question. Who's best to answer that one?
So, hi, Vanya, thanks for the question. So in the standard contract, which is being worked on, there is
I think Liz is talking, but she's on mute.
Oh, okay.
You weren't on mute, Liz.
Yeah, now you're on mute.
Now you're on mute.
Okay, now I'm not muted, I think. Right.
Yeah,
okay,
you're
try
okay
again.
now,
Third time lucky. Yeah. So, hi, Vanya. Thanks for the question. So, the difference between version 2.1 and version 3 is that it does actually explicit the issue of making sure that one MPAN isn't registered to provide flexibility through two flex providers for the same time period. I would need to go back and look at the wording of that to understand that a bit better, but it does recognise that there is a need to actually have a process in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, Liz. Thank you for the question, Vanya. There's a question from Phil Jeffrey in the chat, probably maybe one for you, Jeremy. How long have MPG committed to using Piccolo for?
We have a contract to use Piccolo, so we started to use Piccolo last year. I think we took them on middle of last year, and in the first instance, it's a 2-year contract, so it will cover us for all of this year, and it will cover us into a portion of next year. Like, you know, anything else, it's kind of subject to kind of commercial kind of negotiations and all the rest of it. And I don't think we have a particular kind of view at this juncture whether you know, what kind of the timescale is that we kind of use Piccolo for. And by that, I'm not saying we're going to move away from Piccolo, nor am I saying that we're going to commit to Piccolo. But in the first instance, it was a 2-year partnership, and I think we'll just see where we go in those 2 years, and then make a decision accordingly in terms of the next steps.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Jeremy. Any other questions from anyone? No? Okay. If you do have any other questions that just pop up as we're continuing through, please just do drop them in the chat, and if we've got time, I'll come back to those. So I am just going to launch a couple of final polls now, if you wouldn't mind participating in these. So there's just 2 questions in this one. So the first one is, how likely will it be that you will participate in flexibility tenders within the next 1 to 2 years? On a scale from very likely to very unlikely. And then just a poll just to get a quick bit of feedback on how you found the session today. So how satisfied you were with today's session. So if you wouldn't mind participating in those polls very quickly, and then I'll pass you back to Liz. Brilliant, I can see the votes coming through there. Great, let's give it one more moment. And we'll just end the poll there. Fantastic, thank you for that. I'll just briefly share results. So you can see it's a good appetite on the call and take in terms of taking part in future tenders, and some really positive feedback on the session today. So thank you very much, everyone, for that. Okay, I will hand you back to Liz, but as I say, if you do have any other questions, drop them in the chat, and if we've got time at the end, we'll make sure we come back to those.
Hi, thanks, Rebecca. So thank you for staying with us on the webinar, and I hope you found it interesting. I'm just going to round off with some information about other things that you might find interesting. So we've been running a series of regional decarbonisation workshops across our region. These are hybrid events. You can actually go to them in person, or you can attend online. We've got 3 coming up in April at Sheffield, Middlesbrough and Newcastle. There's also the Utility Week Live, which is a large industry trade fair and conference event. We've got a stand there if you'd like to come and visit us and have a chat to us in person. And we've got a couple of speakers there as well. The other event in June is the Power Responsive Summer event. Power Responsive is an industry initiative to actually increase the amount of flexibility on the system through demand side response and storage. So that might be something you're interested in too. We also have a regular mailing list for the latest news from the System Flexibility team. So if you'd like to be added to that, just drop us an email at flexibility@northernpowergrid.com. And if you'd like to get in touch with us and arrange a meeting with us to discuss, the specifics of your opportunities and assets, then you can get in touch with us at the same email address. Thank you. Next slide. And then just finally, we've developed this animation which aims to set out in an easy, understandable manner what flexibility services are, so people might be interested in seeing that themselves or sharing that amongst their customer base as well. And I think that brings us to the end of the webinar. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and we look forward to more conversations with you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Liz. There was just a question in the chat about whether we'll be sharing the recording, sharing the slides. We'll be sharing the slide deck and the recording with everyone who's attended. So thank you everyone for your participation. I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks.